The Lord Jesus had just told the parable about the vineyard owner who'd let out his vineyard to tenants. When the owner sent servants to get some fruit, the tenants beat them and threw them out. Then when the owner sent his son, they killed him. The religious leaders recognized that the owner pictures God, the son, Jesus, and the tenants, they themselves. We'll now read Luke chapter 20, verses 19 to 26. The scribes and the chief priests sought to lay hands on him, that's Jesus, at that very hour, for they perceived that he told this parable against them. But they feared the people. So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be sincere, that they might catch him in something he said, so as to deliver him up to the authority and jurisdiction of the governor. So they asked him, "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly and show no partiality, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar or not?" But he perceived their craftiness and said to them, "Show me a denarius. Whose likeness and inscription does it have?" They said, "Caesar's." He said to them, "Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they were not able in the presence of the people to catch him in what he said, but marveling at his answer, they became silent. The religious leaders did not like Jesus. They did not like him at all. He was a threat to their authority. He was a threat to their power over the people. He wasn't one of them. And as well as that, he pointed out to them their faults, their hypocrisy, that's saying one thing and doing the opposite. He told the crowds about them too. No, the religious leaders did not like the Lord Jesus. In fact, they hated him. So they tried to turn the people away from him. They tried to discredit him. They knew from what the Lord Jesus said and what he did that he claimed to be the Messiah, the special one who God had promised to send. And they rightly thought the Messiah would most certainly keep God's law. So if they could find the Lord Jesus breaking God's law or speaking against it, then they could focus on that and make sure that the people understood that that wasn't something the Messiah would do. In fact, they could say he was a bad man. So they watched him and listened to him and watched him and listened to him. They tried asking trick questions, but he always answered them and then turned the issue round to make them look at themselves, their behaviour and thinking, what they were really like. They just couldn't catch him out. He didn't break God's law, nor did he say anything against it. And this made them even more angry. They thought that they might make something of his healing people on the Sabbath day, the day that God had given them to rest. But as we've seen, that wasn't a successful strategy, because the Lord Jesus had simply pointed out several truths. Firstly, the Sabbath had been given by God for people's benefit, and healing certainly benefited people. Secondly, they, the religious leaders, did work on the Sabbath when they considered it necessary, so breaking their own rules, like watering their donkeys or saving a child or animal that had fallen down a well. Thirdly, as creator, he, Jesus, was actually Lord of the Sabbath. He could, in fact, do what he wished. However hard they tried, they failed to find fault with the Lord Jesus. He kept the law that God had given the Israelites, and in addition, he pointed out that they themselves failed to do so. There was nothing that they could say to the people to stop them crowding round him. But in fact, although the religious leaders may not have realized this, the crowds generally only went to him because they enjoyed the miracles, not because they really believed in him. And now we see that the leaders managed to come up with a really good question. They would catch him this time, surely. They waited until there was a crowd of people, it seems, to hear what he said, and they started with a bit of flattery about how he truly taught God's ways. Then comes their brilliant question. Should they pay taxes to the hated Roman Emperor Caesar? Either way, they had him caught. If he said yes, well, the people hated paying taxes, and they particularly hated paying taxes to those who conquered them and occupied the country, the Romans. So the scribes and chief priests would tell the people that Jesus was going round supporting the enemy and telling the people they must pay taxes to them. Now, if he said no, that they shouldn't pay taxes to Caesar, they would then tell the Romans that he was encouraging people not to pay their taxes, and this was rebellion, and the Romans needed to deal with him. They had him caught. This was a very good question. We know that the religious leaders desperately wanted to get rid of Jesus. Sometime before then, they decided that he should be killed. And there were occasions when they tried to kill him, but failed. But now it had rather got beyond that. Rather than killing him, it would be much better, they decided, if they could persuade the Roman rulers to do so, to get the authorities to execute him. And there'd be two big advantages in this. Firstly, they could tell the people that it was the Romans who killed him, and so move the blame from themselves. Secondly, they wanted Jesus to suffer. They wanted him to suffer the terrible, excruciating, appalling death that the Romans gave to the worst criminals, crucifixion. That would most certainly satisfy their thirst for his blood. So really the best result for them from their question will be that the Lord Jesus said that they shouldn't pay taxes to Caesar, and they could tell the Romans he was a dangerous rebel. In fact, they themselves hated the Roman rulers, but they so much wanted to get rid of Jesus that their hatred of the Romans didn't matter. Their number one priority was to persuade the Romans to execute the Lord Jesus. Well, Jesus perceived, understood that they were trying to trick him. Show me a coin, he said. And they produced a common coin, the denarius. The denarius had a picture of the Roman Emperor Caesar and words giving his name. So they were using Roman currency. And in doing so, they were accepting Roman authority. In fact, it showed that they were subject to Caesar. It was because they hadn't been subject to God's authority that they were now subject to Caesar. And the Lord Jesus tells them to give to Caesar what's due to him, and to God what's due to him. The scribes and the chief priests marveled at the answer and could think of no more to say. Well, here's something for us to think about. Do we give the authorities what they're entitled to, including our taxes? And do we give to God what he's entitled to, our obedience and trust?